The great ship Dauntless Crown moved slowly above the blue world of NetNarrator. Clouds covered the land like soft waves, and silver light from the nearby stars shone through them. Inside the ship stood Captain Ethan Cole, watching the planet below. He was tall, calm, and tired in a quiet way. Years of battle had left marks on his heart, though no one could see them. Ethan had seen many planets before. He'd fought in dark wars that lasted too long. He had lost friends and seen hope fade. Yet this trip was not about war, it was about peace. NetNarrator was the place where humans hoped to start again, to show that they could build instead of destroy. He was there to protect an important guest, Queen Alexandra of the Northern Dominion. She was known across the worlds for her wisdom and her courage. Many said her voice could quiet angry crowds, and her kindness had stopped battles before they began. But some said she kept her heart locked away. Her husband had died long ago during one of the border wars, and since then, she had lived only for duty. Ethan had never met her, but he had heard about her. Soldiers in the mess hall spoke of her grace with respect. Young officers argued about whether she was real or only a symbol invented by politics. Ethan did not join the talk. He only listened and wondered. What kind of woman could hold so many hearts without ever offering her own? The ship began its slow descent through NetNarrator's atmosphere. Rings of clouds spun around the hull as golden light touched the horizon. The air outside glowed like melted silver. Ethan thought of Earth and the oceans he had not seen since boyhood. He remembered the sound of waves, the smell of rain, and the way sunlight touched the sea at dawn. He wondered if this new world would remind him of that peace or steal it away again. The Queen's arrival was set at the Grand Capitol Dome near the planet's equator. The city was built on green plains, surrounded by water, a place of gardens and tall glass towers. The people of NetNarrator had worked for years to prepare for this day. They wanted everything perfect: the lights, the banners, the music. Yet despite all the plans, there was a quiet feeling of fear beneath the celebration. Not everyone believed peace would last. Some whispered that the colonies would fall back into fighting once the ceremony was over. Ethan heard these whispers too, and they never left his mind. When the ship landed, the platform shined with gold and white. Crowds stood waiting at a safe distance, waving flags and singing old Earth songs. The wind carried the sound into the sky. Ethan stepped out first, scanning the area. His troops formed neat lines, their uniforms bright under the sun. Then Queen Alexandra appeared at the top of the ramp. The crowd gasped softly. She was not wearing her crown. Instead, a simple silver band held her dark hair in place. Her gown gleamed like morning light. She held her head high, but moved with quiet grace. Even before she spoke, it was clear she carried both strength and sadness. Ethan bowed as she came closer. She extended her hand, and he took it carefully. Her skin was cool, her eyes steady. For a moment they looked at each other, and something wordless passed between them. It was not love, not yet, but it was understanding, an unspoken sign that each saw the other not as a symbol, but as a person. "Welcome to NetNarrator, Your Majesty," Ethan said softly. Her smile was faint. "Thank you, Captain. It is good to stand on peaceful ground again." Her voice was gentle, like music carried by wind, yet there was an ache inside it too. He nodded. "We will make sure it stays peaceful, Queen Alexandra." "I hope so," she said. Then, after a small pause, she added, "But peace is never easy, is it?" "Your Majesty." "It takes people willing to fight for it, but in a different way." That answer made her look at him longer than before. A little hint of warmth touched her eyes, something close to curiosity. Later, as night came, the fleet anchored above the city. Lights from the towers reflected in the rivers below. Ethan stood again at the observation deck of the Dauntless Crown. He could see faint movement in the streets far down on the surface. Music rose through the air, soft, hopeful, unsure. He thought about the Queen, the loss in her voice, the quiet fire behind her calm expression. He had come only to guard her. He told himself it would be a short duty, another mission finished, another medal placed away in a drawer. But that night, while watching the glowing planet turn beneath him, Ethan felt something stir inside his heart. He could not name it yet. It was not desire, not pride, but a deep wish and echo of something he thought he no longer had within him. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was the beginning of something he could not stop even if he tried. Outside, the stars flared bright like watchful eyes. Inside, Captain Ethan Cole stood alone and did not know that his life was already changing. The morning after the Queen's arrival was calm and bright. Soft sunlight poured through the tall windows of the central palace on NetNarrator. Birds sang near the glass walls, and the air smelled of new blossoms. It was a day that seemed made for peace. Captain Ethan Cole stood beside the doorway of the Queen's meeting chamber. He had been assigned as her personal guard during her stay. His job was simple on paper, to protect her, yet already he found it hard to keep his thoughts simple. He could not stop thinking of her quiet eyes, the strength in her calm voice, and the faint sadness that followed her like a shadow. Inside the room, Queen Alexandra sat at a large table with her advisors. They spoke about trade, education, and the rebuilding of the colonies. Her speech was soft but steady. Everyone listened closely when she spoke. No one dared to interrupt her. Even those who had once doubted her leadership now looked at her with deep respect. After the meeting ended, she asked Ethan to walk with her through the gardens. As they stepped outside, the sunlight touched the white stones of the path. Flowers of every color grew along the edges. A gentle breeze moved through the tall grass and made it look like a river of green silk. "The world is still young," she said, looking over the fields. "It reminds me of Earth and the stories my mother used to tell me." She said green was the color of hope. Ethan walked beside her quietly for a moment. "It still is," he said. "We just forget it sometimes." She smiled, the kind of smile that held both happiness and pain. "Do you believe peace will last, Captain?" "I want to believe it will," he said. "But peace doesn't just appear. It needs people to protect it, not with guns, but with patience." She glanced at him. "You sound more like a poet than a soldier." He shrugged slightly. "Maybe I've spent too much time looking at the stars." "They make a man think of bigger things." She laughed. It was a genuine laugh, light and gentle, and Ethan found himself wishing she would do it again. A few minutes, she spoke not as a queen but as a woman asking about ships, food, and the strange traditions of the fleet. She wanted to know what it felt like to live in space, to stand between planets and still feel small. Ethan answered simply, describing the silence of the void and the comfort of hearing a human voice through the radio after long hours alone. When they reached the end of the path, Alexandra turned toward him. "You've seen much suffering, haven't you?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice low. "Do you ever get used to it?" He shook his head. "No one should." Her eyes softened. "Good. Then perhaps there's still a chance for our kind to become better than our past." That night, the palace held a small dinner for the delegations. Ethan stood behind the Queen's chair, alert to every sound and movement. Around the long table, leaders from many human colonies shared stories and raised glasses to peace. The Queen listened to each with grace, answering with kindness even those who spoke with pride or doubt. When the musicians began to play, the mood grew lighter. The sound of string and flute filled the hall. Some guests danced, others talked in quiet groups. Alexandra looked tired, yet she stayed until the end. Ethan noticed how she tried to appear at ease, though her eyes often drifted toward the stars visible beyond the glass roof. When the guests had gone, only the Queen, Ethan, and a few servants remained. She thanked the staff and then walked toward the balcony. Ethan followed at a respectful distance. Outside, the night air was cool. The moonlight wrapped the city below in silver. Alexandra rested her hands on the railing and breathed deeply, as if trying to draw strength from the sky itself. "I wonder," she said softly, "if people will ever stop needing heroes to save them. Maybe the day they learn to save themselves, we will finally have peace." Ethan stayed silent for a moment. Then he said, "Sometimes heroes are just people who keep standing when others give up." She looked at him and smiled faintly. "And what are you, Captain Ethan Cole? A hero, or a man who has not learned to give up?" "Maybe a bit of both," he replied. For a long moment they stood together under the stars. Neither spoke. The world around them was quiet. Even the city's hum seemed to fade. Alexandra's hands trembled slightly from the cool air. Without thinking, Ethan removed his outer coat and placed it over her shoulders. She turned to him, surprised, but did not protest. "You are a strange soldier, Captain," she said softly. "Maybe," Ethan said. But I was taught to protect what matters. Her eyes met his, and something warm passed between them, against something gentle yet powerful, like the beginning of fire. When he left the balcony that night, he told himself he had only done his duty. But deep inside, he knew that duty and desire were beginning to cross paths, and nothing in his life would be simple again. The day of the peace celebration came with bright sunlight and the smell of rain. NetNarrator seemed alive that morning. Colorful flags waved high above the grand Capitol dome, and people from every province filled the wide courtyards. Music played from tall speakers, and children ran in circles laughing. For the first time in many years, the sound of joy replaced the noise of war. Captain Ethan Cole walked through the busy streets with his team. His eyes never stopped moving. Though the city looked peaceful, he knew danger could hide behind beauty. The Queen was the heart of the celebration, and that meant she was also a target. He had spent nights checking every guard post, every new face among the staff, and every shadow that moved where it should not. Inside the palace, Queen Alexandra sat before a mirror while her attendants helped her dress. She wore a long gown the color of the evening sky. A small silver chain rested around her neck, simple yet elegant. Her chief advisor told her the guest list again and reviewed the speeches, but her thoughts were elsewhere. In her mind, she kept hearing Ethan's words from the balcony. I was taught to protect what matters. There had been something honest, something deeply human in the way he said it. For a woman who had lived so long surrounded by lies, that honesty had felt like light in a dark room. When she entered the main hall, the guests rose to greet her. Ethan stood near the great doors, dressed in full uniform. Their eyes met for just a moment before she walked to her seat. The music changed, and the feast began. The tables stretched across the hall, filled with food from every colony on NetNarrator. Delegates gave short speeches, raising glasses to friendship and unity. As the evening passed, laughter filled the room, and it almost seemed that peace was real after all. But near the end of the night, Ethan noticed something strange. Two servants walked close to the far wall, carrying trays that seemed too heavy for food. They moved quickly and avoided eye contact. Ethan's instincts stirred. He whispered an order through his earpiece, and two soldiers quietly shifted position. At that moment, the Queen stood to address the room. Her speech was soft and strong, speaking not of power, but of forgiveness and rebuilding. People listened, moved by her words. She said, "Let this world be proof that we can grow again, even after fire." Just as she spoke those words, Ethan saw one of the servants reach under the tray. His heart raced. "Get down," shouted, running toward the stage. The explosion hit a second later. The sound was like thunder trapped in stone. The blast threw Ethan off his feet and sent fire across the hall. The lights shattered, glass rained from above, and screams filled the air. Guards rushed forward, pulling the Queen to safety. Smoke covered everything, thick and bitter. Ethan forced himself up, his ears ringing. Flames burned along the far wall, and the ceiling groaned as if it would fall. He saw the Queen being led toward the exit by two soldiers and ran to join them. Another explosion hit near the entrance, cutting off the way. "Back through the side hall," Ethan shouted. He took the Queen's hand and led her into the smoke. She stumbled once, her gown tearing on debris, but she did not complain. Courage surprised him even now. They moved through a corridor filled with dust and broken stone. The sound of battle echoed outside. Whoever had planned the attack had sent armed men to the outer gates. Ethan stopped only to grab a fallen rifle. He walked ahead, making sure each turn was clear. "Captain," the Queen said as they moved. "The others my advisors. We'll find them once you're safe," he said quickly. When they reached a small door leading to the garden, Ethan checked his scanner. The area was clear. Pushed the door open, and cool wind rushed in, carrying the smell of fire and rain. They ran across the grass, heading for the landing field. Lights from the royal guards flashed in the distance. The Queen slowed once, looking back at the burning palace. "Everything we built," she whispered. "Can build again," Ethan said, his voice rough but sure. "As long as you live, there is still a future." When they reached the safe zone, more soldiers appeared. Medics hurried to treat the wounded. The Queen refused to rest until she was sure the survivors were safe. Even with ash on her face, she stood tall among the crowd. People gathered around her, and her calm presence quieted their fear. Ethan watched her from a few steps away. His chest ached, both from the smoke and something deeper. He had nearly lost her, and in that moment he realized how much she had come to mean to him. It's not as a ruler, not even as a symbol, but as the one person who made the endless struggle seem worth it. That night, when the fires were finally out, Ethan found himself standing on a balcony again. The city below was still and dark. Queen Alexandra joined him, her gown now plain, covered by a cloak. She looked tired but unbroken. She said quietly, "You saved my life today." Ethan shook his head. "Only did my duty." "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "You did more than duty." He did not answer. The silence between them carried more meaning than words could. Below them, the first signs of dawn touched the horizon. And though the future was uncertain, for that brief moment, the morning light seemed like hope itself. Days passed after the attack, and the city of NetNarrator slowly began to rise again. Smoke faded, the buildings were repaired, and the people returned to their work. Oh. But even as the outer walls were fixed, hearts still carried wounds. Many had lost friends in the explosion at the palace, and trust was harder to rebuild than stone. Captain Ethan Cole remained by Queen Alexandra's side. He spoke little, but his eyes missed nothing. Since the attack, the queen refused to hide behind guards or walls. She insisted on walking among the people, helping to visit the wounded and comfort the mourning families. Ethan followed her everywhere, his presence quiet but strong beside her. One afternoon, they went to the edge of the city where the newly built homes stood. Children played on the streets again, drawing pictures on stone walls. The queen knelt beside a young girl who had lost her brother in the blast. The girl handed Alexandra a small flower made of paper and said, "He said the queen would make us safe again." The queen held the flower carefully and smiled, though her eyes filled with tears. "He was right," she said softly. "I will keep my promise." Ethan watched her as she comforted the child. Every word she spoke seemed to carry the weight of love and duty together. To him, she was no longer just a queen. She was proof that kindness could survive, even in ruins. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ethan and Alexandra walked down a quiet path by the river. The city lights danced across the water, and the air felt cooler after the heat of day. She looked tired but peaceful. "It never ends," she said quietly, watching the river flow. "Each time we think peace is near, another shadow appears." "Shadows are part of every world," Ethan said. "But light always returns, Your Majesty." She glanced at him and smiled faintly. "You always say the right thing, Captain. You ever doubt your own words?" He paused for a moment. "Every day," he said simply. "But I still say them, because someone has to believe, even when it's hard." They walked in silence for a while. The sound of running water mixed with the faint hum of night insects. The queen's long gown brushed lightly against the stones. She turned her face toward the starlit sky and whispered, "Sometimes I wish I could leave it all behind. To forget the crown, the weight, the endless speeches. To just be a woman again." Ethan looked at her. "And what would you do then?" She thought for a moment and said, "Maybe I'd travel. Walk through the markets as a simple traveler. I'd sit by the sea and watch the waves crash. I'd eat food from a street vendor and maybe no one would recognize me." He smiled a little. "That actually sounds nice, you Captain Cole," she said, turning to him with a teasing glint in her eyes. "What would you do if you were free from duty?" "I wouldn't know what to do with myself," he said. "I've been a soldier all my life, but maybe I'd learn to live quietly, to work the land, to sleep through the night without alarms ringing." She laughed softly. "You make peace sound like a dream worth chasing." "It is," he said. "And maybe one day we'll both find it." That night a council meeting was held again in the smaller chamber. The queen's advisors were restless. Many blamed themselves for letting the attack happen. Others argued that the queen was risking her life by being too open with the people. One advisor even suggested that she retreat to a secure base until the threats were gone. Alexandra listened quietly, then said, "If I hide now, fear wins. And if fear wins, we lose everything we built." Ethan watched her as she spoke. Her voice carried the strength of 1,000 hearts. Even those who disagreed found themselves silent, unable to argue with such courage. After the meeting, when everyone left, she leaned against the balcony rail and sighed. The stars were bright above the rebuilt city. Ethan stepped beside her. "You made them believe again," he said. "I hope so," she said softly. Then she looked at him. "And you? Do you believe, Captain?" He hesitated. "I believe in you." Her eyes widened slightly, not from pride or surprise, but from something deeper, something gentle that she had buried for so long. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" he asked quietly. "It's the truth." For a moment, she looked away, her breath uneven. Then she said, "Because truth like that can change lives." They stood together, the air heavy with unspoken feelings. A bell rang from the lower tower, marking midnight. The sound echoed across the empty halls. Alexandra drew her cloak closer and turned to leave. "Rest well, Captain," she said softly. When she walked away, Ethan remained at the balcony. His heart beat faster than any battlefield had ever made it. He looked at the stars again, thinking of the way her eyes had glimmered beneath their light. He whispered into the quiet night, "Too late to stop now." What neither of them knew was that fate had already chosen their path. The peace summit that would come the next morning would not only test their courage, but also reveal what truly lived in their hearts, the beginning of a love that even war could not silence. The morning of the final peace summit came. The sky over NetNarrator was clear, pale blue with thin clouds drifting like quiet dreams. The city was calm once more, though heavy guards stood watch at every tower and gate. People had been waiting months for this day at the signing of the Unity Accord, the final seal that would join all human provinces under one rule. Captain Ethan Cole woke before dawn. He looked out from his quarters on the upper floor of the palace. The gardens below sparkled with dew, and birds called in the distance. Everything looked peaceful, but he felt an ache deep in his heart. The last few weeks had changed everything between him and Queen Alexandra. They had shared danger, long talks, and silences that meant more than any words. He told himself again that he was there to serve, to protect her. Yet it was no longer so simple. He wanted her to be safe, yes, but now he wanted her to be happy too. That thought scared him more than any battlefield ever had. When the sun rose higher, Ethan went to meet her before the summit began. She stood in her chamber wearing a white gown. It was simple but beautiful, light as snow under the morning sun. Her crown rested on a small table beside her, but she had not yet placed it on her head. "You are quiet today, Captain," she said, with a small smile when she saw him. "I am thinking, Your Majesty," he said. "Of what?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then said of how much will change after today. She turned away to look out the window. "Yes," she said. "Today we make peace official. No more battles, no more borders." Then she added in a gentler voice, "It is strange, isn't it? When the greatest dream comes true, part of you feels like it cannot be real." Ethan stepped closer. "It will be real because you believed in it," he said. Her eyes met his. "You make it sound so easy," she said. "It's not easy," he replied, "but it's right." The ceremony began at noon. Leaders from every human province filled the grand hall. They sat behind wide crystal tables, each ready to sign the accord. Banners of silver and blue hung from the walls, showing symbols of hope and unity. The people outside watched through giant screens set up in the streets. Everyone waited to see if peace would finally win. Queen Alexandra entered the hall to the sound of soft music. She walked with perfect calm, though her heart beat fast. Ethan followed her at a measured distance, ready for anything. When she reached the end of the hall, she stood before the gathered leaders and began to speak. "My friends," she said clearly, "we have spent too long apart. We have fought for land and pride, while forgetting that we are one people. Let today mark not the end of war, but the beginning of understanding." Her voice was steady, each word ringing through the hall. When she finished speaking, applause filled the room. One by one, the leaders came forward to sign the accord. Finally, it was her turn. She took the pen, signed her name, and raised the treaty high for all to see. The crowd outside erupted with joy. Bells rang across the city. For the first time in many lifetimes, humanity stood united again. When the hall began to clear, Alexandra turned to Ethan. "It's over," she said quietly, almost in disbelief. "Not over," he said. "Just beginning." As they walked out together, cheering echoed around them. Yet amid the noise, there was a strange moment of silence between them. She looked at him and smiled faintly. Then she said words that caught him off guard. "Will you walk with me, just for a moment?" They left the hall and went up to the high balcony where the whole city could be seen. Below them, thousands of people cheered and waved flags. The light of sunset began to touch the towers, painting them with gold. Alexandra rested her hands on the railing and said, "Look at them, Captain. They are not afraid anymore." "That was your doing," he said. "Our doing," she corrected. For a while they said nothing. The sun fell lower, and the sky turned red and orange. Then Ethan spoke softly, almost to himself. "I wish I could wed her," he whispered, not realizing he had spoken out loud. The queen turned slowly. Her eyes met his, calm but bright like starlight caught in glass. She seemed to hear every word. The world below them continued to cheer, but in that moment everything felt still. She stepped closer and said just one word, "Yes." Ethan froze, unsure if he had heard her right. But she smiled, warm, true, and certain. The bells from the hall began to ring again, carrying their sound across the city. The people cheered once more, thinking the queen was greeting them. But Ethan knew it meant something else now. In the days that followed, the queen and the captain stood before the people again, not for war. It's not for ceremony, but for marriage. The celebration filled the world with music and laughter. Ships flew across the sky like silver birds as fireworks painted the heavens. When the cheers faded and night fell, Ethan and Alexandra stood together beneath the quiet moon. The air smelled of flowers and rain. She leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "We gave them peace. But we also gave ourselves a reason to keep believing." He smiled and held her hand. Around them, the new world pulsed with light and hope. Humanity had learned that victory did not come from power or fear, but from love strong enough to heal even the deepest scars. And somewhere high above, the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if approving the union of two hearts that had finally dared to say yes.